Imagine having the power to push beyond your limits every single time. This isn't a superpower, it's a fact, and it's called the 40% rule. Now let's unravel this rule together. The 40% rule is a principle presented by none other than David Goggins. Who is David Goggins, you ask? He's a retired Navy SEAL, a man of steel who has not only completed over 60 ultra-marathons, but also set new records in many of them. But what exactly does this 40% rule entail? It's simple yet profound. According to Goggins, when your mind is screaming at you to stop, when it's telling you that you're done, exhausted, beaten, you're actually only 40% done. Yes, you heard that right. You still have 60% of your potential untapped, waiting to be unleashed. Now you might be wondering, how can this rule apply to me? Let's dive into a story that illustrates the power of this rule. Meet John, an average guy with an average job living an average life, but John was destined for more than average. John was a man who, like many of us, found himself stuck in a rut. His life was a monotonous cycle of work, eat, sleep, repeat. However, deep within him, a spark ignited. He yearned for change, he yearned for more, he yearned for a life that was anything but average. One day, while trawling the internet, he stumbled upon the concept of the 40% rule. This rule, coined by the renowned David Goggins, posits that when we think we've given our all, we've barely scratched the surface. We've only used up 40% of our capabilities. Intrigued, John decided to apply this rule to his life. At first, it wasn't easy. His mind was a battlefield, a constant tug of war between comfort and growth. Doubts clouded his mind. Could he really push beyond his perceived limits? Could he truly achieve more? But John was determined. He chose to believe in the power of the 40% rule and persisted. His determination did not go unrewarded. Slowly but surely, he began to see changes. He started waking up earlier, working harder, pushing himself further. He was no longer just going through the motions. He was living with purpose. He was pushing past his 40%. And then, one day it happened, the breakthrough. He ran that extra mile. He finished that book he'd been putting off. He spoke up in the meeting. He pushed past his comfort zone. He tapped into that elusive 60%. And it was empowering. John had transformed. He was no longer just an average guy living an average life. He was a man who dared to push his limits, a man who dared to venture into the unknown, a man who dared to be more. And so John discovered the profound truth of the 40% rule. But what did that mean for his life? The transformation was astounding. John's life began to change in ways he hadn't even dreamed of. With the 40% rule as his guiding principle, he discovered a reservoir of strength and resilience he never knew he possessed. Each morning, as the sun painted the sky with hues of orange and pink, John laced up his running shoes and hit the pavement. The sound of his steady breath and rhythmic strides became his new anthem. What started as a struggle to run a mile gradually turned into 5, then 10. And before he knew it, John was crossing the finish line of his first marathon. His legs were heavy, his lungs screamed for air, but the smile on his face was brighter than the sun above. The taste of triumph was sweet, and he was thirsty for more. But the transformation wasn't confined to the running track. At work, John began to approach challenges with an invigorated spirit. He pushed past his comfort zone, taking on more complex projects and responsibilities. His colleagues noticed this change, and soon, John found himself climbing the corporate ladder, his grit and determination becoming a beacon of inspiration for those around him. Even his relationships started to flourish. His newfound confidence and positivity became infectious. The man who once shied away from social gatherings was now the life of the party, his laughter resonating through the room. His relationships deepened, with his loved ones admiring the new John, the man who had pushed past his perceived limits and emerged victorious on the other side. The 40% rule had not just transformed John, it had rebirthed him. It had peeled back the layers of self-doubt and fear, revealing a man of steel underneath, a man who believed in his potential and had the courage to tap into it. And so John, an average man, became extraordinary, all thanks to the 40% rule. So, what does John's story tell us about the 40% rule? Well, it underscores the profound impact of pushing beyond our self-imposed boundaries. John, like many of us, was trapped in the illusion of his limitations. He believed he'd hit his peak when, in reality, he was only tapping into 40% of his potential. This is the essence of the 40% rule. But when John discovered this rule, he realized that he could go beyond, much beyond what he thought was his best. By challenging his perceived capacity, he unlocked untapped reservoirs of strength, resilience, and determination. The 40% rule is not just about physical endurance. It's a philosophy that applies to all facets of life. It's about pushing past discomfort, overcoming mental barriers, and transcending perceived limitations. Remember, when you think you're done, you're only 40% there. The rest is up to you.